What's up, guys? Welcome back to Talkin TUF. And in this one, we have the last quarterfinal fight until finally we can get to the semis and get this competition really rolling. But this episode, I will say, maybe I shouldn't say this because then you guys will just stop watching. But this episode of Tough kind of bored me a little bit. Not gonna lie. I mean, well, I should. I mean, I guess I should define a little bit. I mean, a little bit means I was like basically falling asleep throughout the whole thing, which is pretty bad. But the fight was all right. I mean, it wasn't too great, but it is what it is. Not every episode is going to be a banger. But nonetheless, we still got to get into it a little bit or else, we wouldn't know who's in the semifinals. So this episode is important whether we want to like it or not. So this one, obviously, the final flyweight fight is Brogan Walker of Team Nunes versus Hannah Guy of Team Pena. And for this one, Brogan Walker, I mean, there wasn't too much, I guess, to note, with her story. I guess she's a veteran. She's been around for a tiny bit. And Hannah Guy, she she has some interesting living situations, to say the least. So she lives in a 1991 ambulance. And yeah, you heard me right. 1991 ambulance. So she, I guess, converted it into her own little pad or whatever. I think it's pretty cool. They showed the setup of it obviously on the show. It was kind of sick, honestly, the way they did it. But yeah, I mean, fighting takes dedication, and there you go. I mean, that's the best example, living in an ambulance. But yeah, she says the gas for it is expensive too. I mean, that makes sense if you don't live under a rock nowadays. But yeah, besides that, like I said, there just wasn't too much that happened in this episode. Usually, there's something, but I don't know. I mean, this one, I guess the craziest thing, well, not even craziest, the coolest thing that happened outside of the two fighters was Brady Heastan from the last season of Tough. He obviously trains with Michael Chiesa and Juliana Pena, so he was helping out Team Pena in this one, and not much else to it. I mean, I'm just a big fan of that guy. I thought he was pretty cool on the last season of Tough. He went through the house really kind of in a crazy way. I think he had a couple nice finishes, and he was hurt while he was doing that. And then in the finale, he fought Ricky Tercios to a just crazy war, but he lost obviously by decision. So I think he had lingering injuries that he had to take care of, but hopefully the UFC keeps him around because honestly, Brady Heastan was, in my opinion, one of the highlights of last season of Tough. But anyway, back to this season of Tough. Yeah, I mean, besides that, like I said, there just wasn't too much that happened, so I guess we'll get into the fight now. So like I said, there was no drama leading up to this one. It was just, your typical matchup. You got Brogan Walker, like I said, of Team Nunes versus Hannah Guy of Team Pena. And the first round, I guess you could say it was kind of a feeling out process until obviously Brogan ended up landing a nice hook on Hannah, dropping her. But Hannah did get up fairly quickly, but then got taken down, held down for decent majority of that round, I guess, when things were actually happening. Because like I said, the first part of the round was more of a feeling out process. They were landing, but it was kind of equal and wasn't really much of note. So obviously once Brogan got that knockdown, got to give round one to her. But yeah, I mean, with round two, it started off close again. That's the thing. I don't know. It was close, for the first few seconds, I guess, and then Hannah got dropped really fast, and she got right back up though. So I don't even know if you want to call it a clean knockdown, but she got back up, and she was fighting well after that. She was pressuring Brogan, and then eventually she took Brogan down and held her down, got her back. Was attacking with chokes and didn't end up getting it. But that's the thing. The round was so close. You could either say that Hannah won it due to the controlled time and obviously the back take, or like I said, Brogan dropped Hannah in the early part of the round, but it wasn't as bad as the knockdown in the first round. So I don't really know how you want to slice that one. I guess you guys would have to watch the fight in order to figure that one out for yourselves. But even me personally, I just don't really know. Obviously, a lot of Team Pena and even Dana White, actually, he thought it was going to go to a third round due to the ending of the round for Hannah. Because that's the other thing to note about MMA judging is just kind of when someone ends off the round on top, throwing down punches or attacking submissions like with back control for like the final minute. That usually bodes well for them on the scorecards, but in this case it didn't. Everybody and their mother thought that this fight was going to round 3, but it didn't. And once obviously you see the judges like have made a decision, you realize that Hannah probably didn't win the fight, and obviously she did not. Brogan Walker won by majority decision. 2 of the judges gave it to her, and then one of them had it go into the round 3, but obviously 2-1 there, so a majority decision. And like I said, there's just not much to note. It was a pretty close fight. Brogan looked good. She has good counter shots, and she's definitely resilient. So, we'll see how the rest of the competition goes for her, but it was a good win nonetheless. And like I said, with that's the last of the quarterfinal matchups. We're finally moving a little bit more forward in the tournament. And with that, let's break down these semifinal matchups that Dana White made. So Team Pena ended up getting the best of Team Nunes in the quarterfinals, at least. Team Pena fighters won 5 fights, while Team Nunes fighters only won 3. And that means in the semifinals, we will be having a matchup that is Team Pena versus Team Pena, and it will be in the heavyweight division. And I'm going to get just right into that one. That is Jordan Hederman versus Zach Pauga. Now, obviously, Jordan Hederman, he looked good in his first fight. He, honestly, he looked pretty good all around. He's got tremendous heart. Obviously, he got hit with that spinning heel kick, but who would have seen that coming, honestly, from Chandler Cole? He did not look like the guy who was about to throw something like that. But besides that, obviously, obviously, he looked pretty good. And Zach Pauga, I remember in the first fight, literally the first episode, if you guys remember all the way back then, he looked really good in his fight. He was picking the guy apart. I forget who he fought. God, the name's escaping me. But I remember he won his fight fairly easily, so this one should be interesting. I feel like Jordan's going to try and get this fight to the ground, and it's up to Zach Pauga to see if he can keep it on the feet. Personally, I think that Zach Pauga is probably going to win just because I remember he trains out of Elevation Fight Team, one of the best teams in MMA. And, I just think he'll be able to stuff Jordan's takedowns. If he's training with Curtis Blades, I would imagine that Curtis Blades is a much better wrestler, so who knows. But I personally got Zach Pauga in this one. But the other heavyweight fight is Team Pena versus Team Nunes. Muhammad Usman versus Eduardo Perez. And now that fight is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most, just because, think about it. Eduardo Perez has just got crazy power in his hands, good takedown defense. He's fast for someone who doesn't necessarily look it. And Muhammad Usman, obviously Kamaru's brother. And besides that, he's got good wrestling. He's good, honestly, all around. He's got heavy hands, but he is a little bit hittable. And I guess for that reason, that's why I'm going to lean towards Eduardo Perez in this semifinal matchup. I just think that Perez is really good. I think he's honestly the threat to win the show. I think it's going to be him versus Zach in the finale, but that's just me. We'll see where this goes. Now, as for the women's flyweights, obviously Brogan Walker just won her fight, so we can get into her a little bit first. She is fighting Laura Gallardo of Team Pena. Now, if you remember, Laura was a late replacement after I think it was Chantel Coates could not make weight in a healthy way. So they called in Laura off the sidelines, and she came in. Obviously won her first fight dominantly, and I think she's probably going to dominate this one too. I think her grappling is no joke, and if Hannah Guy was able to hold Brogan Walker down, I feel like Laura Gallardo should definitely be able to hold her down. And I like Eduardo Perez. I think that Laura Gallardo is a threat to win the whole show. And, I just can't wait for that one. I'm excited to watch her fight, honestly. And as for the last matchup in the flyweight division, we have Juliana Killer Miller versus Caitlin Neal. This is a fight that's interesting to me just because they're both long and rangy. Juliana is a tiny bit hittable, and Caitlin, as we saw in her first fight, she was very good at picking her opponents apart. And I think that she might be able to do that a little bit to Juliana, but I feel like with the Claire Guthrie fight, Juliana will be able to settle in and probably get this fight to the ground. And once it's on the ground, that's when you have to deal with Juliana Miller's unorthodox jiu-jitsu. And I just have a feeling that Caitlin Neal is going to struggle with that when it gets there. And I feel like it honestly will. So I guess if you want to get my predictions, and we'll see how we do at the end of the semifinals, I think it's going to be Zach Pauga of Team Pena versus Eduardo Perez of Team Nunes in the finale for the heavyweights. And then for the flyweights, I personally think it's going to be Laura Gallardo of Team Pena versus Juliana Miller, also of Team Pena. So we'll see how that goes. I love The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, people have said it's taken a bit of like a degeneration. I don't know. I mean, it's downgraded a little bit, I guess. It's back. You gotta like think about it. Like back when TUF 1, 2, 3, like all those were around. Those were literally like some of the best fighters like outside of like the UFC, and in a time when there were actually promotions outside the UFC that were like very relevant. It's not that there aren't any now, but it's just that they're mostly regional people that are fighting now and entry-level fighters coming into the UFC rather than people who might be already like ready to fight some of the top guys. But, nonetheless, it's still good. It's a good way to feed young talent into the UFC, and I love it. And I like some of the fighters on this season. I hope that we see a lot of them in the UFC. I mean, Mo Usman in particular, Eduardo Perez, Juliana Miller, Laura Gallardo, like I said. Even some of the ones who have lost already, like Chandler Cole, I'd love to see him in the UFC. Chantel Coates, I would like to see get a shot in the UFC just because that was unfortunate. It wasn't even really her fault. It was just bad luck that she couldn't really make the weight. But, yeah, like I said, Team Pena took the quarterfinals. I've been saying this whole time that Juliana Pena is a great coach. I would not be surprised if 2 of her fighters win this show, but I guess we'll have to find out later. So I'll see you guys next week.